Tennessee Titans fans, I am here today to give you 5 things about Coach Brian Callahan that encourage me.
I woke up feeling like it was time to tighten up. Yeah.
Yesterday, we did a video about 5 things that discourage me about Brian Callahan. You can go watch that on the channel if you're in a negative mood. But if you're in a positive mood, today we are doing 5 things that encourage me about Brian Callahan. And hopefully you will walk away from this video feeling a little bit encouraged about our head coach. The first thing that encourages me about Brian Callahan is the development of Will Levis. Now listen, back at the start of the year, Will Levis was struggling, okay? He looked like he was lost, looked like he didn't know what he was doing, couldn't read the defense from what we could see at home, turning the ball over, inaccurate passes, not throwing it to the open man. I mean, it was just not good for Will Levis early in the season. And a lot of people complained and said, well, Brian Callahan, he's supposed to be the quarterback whisperer. Ain't he supposed to be helping this guy? He looks to me like he's regressed. He was better off with Vrabel. Well, what about now? Will Levis has improved greatly since he came back from being out with a shoulder injury. He has been really, really good, and one of the only bright spots for the team, for the Titans, especially over the last month. Does Will Levis improved play not get some sort of an attaboy for Coach Brian Callahan? I mean, Will Levis playing much better. You can't blame it on Callahan when Levis is playing poorly and then suddenly not give any credit to Callahan when Levis starts playing better. If we're going to play that game that it's all about coaching and it's all about the coach helping the player develop, then Brian Callahan deserves some credit for how much better Will Levis has played. We'll see how it plays out over these final 5 games of 2024. But Brian Callahan, that's a reason to be encouraged. Will Levis has progressed. He has gotten better when many of us thought that he wouldn't. The second thing that encourages me about Brian Callahan, and I'm going to use one player in particular here, but Calvin Ridley and the use of Calvin Ridley in the offense. Do you remember back at the beginning when we all were declaring that the Calvin Ridley contract was a complete waste of money? Well, look at what the Titans did. Look at what Brian Callahan did. He started trying in every way possible to get Calvin Ridley involved in this offense. And it really started in the Detroit Lions game. I know the Titans were awful in that game, but Calvin Ridley was not. That was the first game where Calvin Ridley looked like he was worth the money. And with DeAndre Hopkins getting traded to Kansas City, Calvin Ridley is pretty much getting a lot of concentration on him from defenses because he is absolutely the biggest receiving threat, and that has, of course, opened up things for guys like Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, who's having quite the season. But Calvin Ridley, you got to give Brian Callahan credit. We have seen in previous Titans offenses when the star receivers weren't getting involved the way that we hoped they would, it just kind of stayed stuck that way and nothing ever got better. But give Brian Callahan credit. He understood. We paid this guy $92 million. We need to get him more involved. And so he started to get him more involved. That gives you hope that when there's star players, when there are people who are on the field that are the best players we have, they need the ball more and more. And Callahan seems to understand that. The third thing that I will say that encourages me about Brian Callahan is that the players do seem to like him. Now, I know yesterday I talked about Brian Callahan's personality and how the team kind of seems a little flat sometimes, and I don't know if that's because they are mirroring Coach Callahan's personality, but I will say this. I know after the Commanders game on Sunday when the team came out really flat, it's easy to just view it as that's the only game we remember. But against the Minnesota Vikings, against the Houston Texans, against the Chargers, this team fought. This team fought to win. This team gave it their all. This is not, we're seeing some teams around the league that kind of look like they're, I don't want to use the word quitting, but we've seen a lot of teams who don't exactly look like they're giving it their best. But in more cases than not, the Tennessee Titans have continued to fight this season. They have continued to play hard. I know Washington, the game against the Commanders, probably not the best example of that. But look at even the second half of that game. They were down 28-7 at the half, and they at least came back out and tried to play better in the second half. So I don't see a group of guys that are just rallying against the head coach, that are, making comments on social media, angry at the coach, bad attitudes. You're not seeing that right now, and I think that is a good sign for Brian Callahan, that the players are still fighting hard and that they appear to want, in most cases, to play for him. The fourth thing that encourages me about Brian Callahan, and some of you are going to completely disagree with me, but I don't care. The offense is better. Okay, now I realize that is clearing a low bar from where the Titans have been with Vrabel the last couple of years with Todd Downing and then Tim Kelly. The Titans offense has been atrocious for the last 2 years, and I think some of us forget when we say things like, oh, well, we'd have just been better off to keep Vrabel. We were better with Vrabel. Do you remember some of those offensive performances? And when I say offensive, it has a double meaning. I mean, literally the offensive performance for the Titans, and in another meaning, the offensive performance. I mean, I think you need to revisit some of these games. I mean, just some of the worst offensive game plans and schemes that you will ever see over the last couple of years by the Tennessee Titans. And were there more factors at play? Yes, the bad offensive line. Ryan Tannehill was losing a step, getting older, had injuries. We didn't have any big weapons on the outside. I understand that. But those offenses were awful. This offense with Brian Callahan, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's been just peachy and rosy the whole time. Obviously, it hasn't. But at least the Titans have scored over 30 points on 2 different occasions. Again, very low bar to clear, but the Titans had not scored over 30 points since December of 2021. I mean, that's awful. The Titans at least scored over 30 on 2 different occasions this season. I think that the offensive line is getting better slowly. I think we have better weapons than we did. And I think the Titans offense as a whole is objectively better. It is not good enough. It is not at all where it needs to be, but it is certainly better than what we have seen. And hopefully that means we're going in the right direction. The final thing that encourages me about Brian Callahan is that he holds players accountable. We saw this way back in week 2 when Will Levis had one of those crazy plays. We tried to underhand it to Tajay Spears. We all remember that play. I was there live. I witnessed it. Brian Callahan on television asked Will Levis, what in the blank are you doing? Holding players accountable. And he didn't let Levis off the hook after the game. In the press conference, he said, that's 2 weeks in a row. He's got to be better. He did the same thing with Jaquan Jackson this past week after the punt return of Jaquan Jackson fumbled for the second game in a row. He didn't care to mince words when he was asked why he benched Jaquan Jackson. He said he fumbled 2 weeks in a row. That's the kind of stuff that gets you benched. So he does hold players accountable. I wish he would hold some of his coaches accountable to that same degree. But I saw what he had to say about Jarvis Brownlee, and some of the comments that Jarvis Brownlee made about how the weather played a factor in the Titans getting beat so bad by the Commanders. Brian Callahan said, no, that's an excuse. That's an excuse, and I'm going to talk to him about that. So I do think Brian Callahan holds the players accountable, doesn't let them walk all over him, doesn't let them just get away with doing or saying anything. And I think that's a good sign. You've got to have a backbone if you are going to be a head coach in this league. And I think Brian Callahan has shown that he will hold the players accountable. These are 5 things that encourage me about Brian Callahan. Do you disagree? Do you have anything you'd like to add? That's what the comment section is for below. And I will see you there. Tighten up. Bye.